Inspiring Voices Radio. I am your host, Brad Harris, and I got my girl T. Marie in the building.
What's up?
And I got my man Sean Mucker with me as well.
What's going on?
People, we have some very, very, very special guests in the building today. And as you know, we've been covering this entire BreonnaTaylor situation since the death occurred. And we have some people in the building that have been active participants in not only the protest, but in inspiring legislation to be passed so that things like this won't happen again. So in the building, we have State Representative Miss Attica Scott.
What's up?
And we have my man, Pastor Tim Finley.
What's up, everybody?
Well, let me say this, Tim Finley Jr. Because I bumped into your father last week, and I was like,
He's got the PhD.
All right, man. Well, it's great to have you guys in the building today. It's great to have you in the building. I'm going to start with Attica. And Attica, you have recently filed a complaint against LMPD.
Right.
And the complaint was, I believe, back in May,
Yes.
when the protests were in their early days. Mm-hmm. And I think this was during the time when the first couple of days of protests occurred, and there was uprising downtown. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of out-of-town folks came in and kind of did some destruction on some businesses downtown. Mm-hmm. But you were participating in a protest during those early days, and you alleged that you were pushed by an LMPD officer and sprayed with pepper spray. Mm. Can you elaborate? Now, let me ask you first. Being a state representative, I'm on the other side of this, so I'm not in politics. Mm-hmm. So for the general public, the perception often is that our politicians often side with law enforcement. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it feels like that even when they're wrong. Mm-hmm. For you, you've been active in speaking out against law enforcement when they're wrong. Mm-hmm. A few years ago, you actually spoke out against JCPS when you felt they were wrong. There was an issue with your daughter, the natural hair. Mm-hmm. So you've been a voice for our community. Do you ever feel a conflict between being a state rep and going up against some forms of state government?
I appreciate that question, and my forgiveness to your listeners. I'm signifying like we're just having a conversation one-on-one. I know they're like, oh, she's not. But it's fair for folks to feel like, and it's true, that there are some politicians who, no matter what, will side with law enforcement without question. And I have never been that person. In fact, that's not why I ran for office. I ran for office because the people that I serve have felt powerless and voiceless, although I believe we all have power and voice, we just use it differently. And so there have been times where I've had to criticize police. After Michael Brown was shot and killed, murdered in Ferguson, I remember writing an op-ed that night about sending my son off to work at White Castle, third shift, and telling him, please be safe. Michael Brown was just murdered in Ferguson. Didn't know any details at the time, but I knew one thing: I had to have a talk with my son. And immediately after that, the president of the SOP decided that he wanted to attack me on air, basically tell me shut up for having an opinion. And the person who was the general manager at our local Fox News affiliate also attacked me on air as well. So I have a history as a local elected official politician of challenging, questioning LMPD, and now as a state rep, the state police, and the National Guard, and what they do to our folks when they come into our communities, and the fact that state police and National Guard shouldn't have ever been in Louisville in the first place.
Okay, so can you walk us through these early days of the protests when the actual assault and the pepper spraying took place?
So this was the second day of protest, Friday, May 29th. I was down there with my daughter and my very dear friend, Shamika Parrish-Fright, and we were, everybody was just chilling. We'd been out there for probably 5 hours, since about 5 o'clock, chanting, marching around the block, marching around LMPD. And then that evening, all of a sudden, we had law enforcement mobilizing against us, ready to attack their neighbors, right? We're supposed to be neighbors. And so this was way before, we had live streamers, folks who, now have that title, going live about what was happening. I decided to go live on my Instagram just because I'm like, I want folks to see what's happening. Like, we've all just been chilling, whatnot, and here they come. And so I went up, walked up to where the police were. We were at 6th and Liberty, and the police were right there at the Department of Corrections, so I walked up to start recording them, and I could see them coming for me. You know how you can see somebody coming. And this officer, black guy, came right for me, and without saying a word, he just started bumping me with his body and pushing me with his body. I'm 5 feet even, right? So I'm not a tall person, so it doesn't make sense for somebody who was at least 6 feet, if not taller, to be pushing up against me. And it's interesting, the question that I've gotten from people is, did I identify myself as a state rep? I'm just not that kind of person. So you shouldn't be treating me any differently than you treat anyone else. So it didn't matter that I was state representative Attica Scott. What mattered is you were being ridiculous and unnecessary. You need to use your words. That's what I tell kids. Use your words. You didn't use your words. You just start bumping up against me. So I ended up separated from my daughter. So my daughter was, thank goodness, with my friend Shamika. I was literally across the street. The tear gas was so bad, I could not get across the street to my daughter, my teenage daughter. That's how bad the tear gas was. So I'm stumbling, falling, don't know if bullets are being shot. I just know that I'm trying to run for my life. And so it took me a little bit to get around the corner. I could not even literally cross the street from Injustice Square Park to the other side of Liberty to get to my daughter. I had to go all the way around the block to get to her. So because that, you know, I'm separated from my daughter, it was probably the most terrifying 8 minutes of my life because I didn't know where she was or what was happening to her. So that was the second night of protest, and that was my experience. And I filed my complaint because I just feel like I cannot be the person who sits back and says, well, you know, there they go, right? Here we go again. I'm not that person. And if we ever had a Department of Justice investigation or any other kind of investigation, I want a paper trail. I want my complaint to be right there. I don't want them to be able to say, well, no one ever filed a complaint. I don't want to be that person.
Do you feel like the police was being the aggressor in the situation down when the riot or when the protest started?
They were definitely being the aggressors. They were definitely being violent. All we were doing was marching around the block and chanting, laying on the ground with our hands up. That was it. And then the next thing you know, here they come in full riot gear for no reason whatsoever. Full riot gear. Never once announced that they were about to use lethal chemicals on us. Never once announced that.
Get a command or nothing.
Never said disperse. Not a word. And I shared, thank goodness for some kind folks who turned that Instagram video that I had into a flash drive that LMPD asked for. Like they couldn't go on my Instagram and see it because they're following all of us anyway. And so thank goodness for the kind people out there who put that on a flash drive for me. So LMPD has it. I mean, it's right there. Y'all never said a word, never said disperse, nothing.
So have they followed up with you since you filed the complaint?
I received a letter about a week and a half later saying that your complaint has been assigned to the person that it was assigned to. So yes.
Okay, so first, let me thank you. And this is also the importance that I preach to black people often, well, everyone, but particularly black people, about voting. Historically, black folks have not been represented as our elected officials. Historically we've had no representation when it comes to policy and lawmaking. So having someone like you as a state rep is an asset to the community, because without you, we would make a complaint, or the protesters would make a complaint. It would fall on deaf ears, and nothing would happen. So, out of these BreonnaTaylor protests, several different issues have arisen that I've kind of been vocal about, for decades, and I'm glad they're finally coming to the surface. One of them is excessive force by police officers, and I think that's kind of obvious. But another is, as we saw last week when protesters came in from out of state, when arrests often happen, arrestees are often overcharged. They often charge them with a multitude of charges, and the ideology is that if we charge them with 20 felonies, then they'll cop out to one. They'll take a plea agreement for one. And this also enhances bond situations. This is a common practice. And then we also saw that it took protesters 18 hours to get out of jail. That's common. When people go to jail, if anyone's ever been to jail, it's a 12 to 24-hour process before you're released. I never understood why it takes that long, but that's the process. But we've seen through these protests, we've seen police actually violate the right to protest. There's been peaceful protests, and police have actually been the initiators in some of these protests. And I'll go back to say that in a David McAtee situation, if anyone has watched the video that was compiled by the New York Times, in the David McAtee situation, I was out on the streets those particular nights. And when the National Guard was in town, they actually had a command post. Initially, the command post was on, I want to say, 7th and Liberty. And then it moved to 9th and Broadway on the second day. Now, to my knowledge, not one protest took place in West Louisville. And you know folks in West Louisville. I mean, folks in West Louisville be doing their own thing. They were in their own world, but there was a curfew issue that night, a curfew order. Protests were taking place that day on 1st and Broadway, on 2nd and Broadway. I actually was out at one on 1st and Broadway. They were in the immediate downtown area. Nothing was taking place on 26th and Broadway. So an order was given, and I had this argument with people a lot. And people like to say that 911 was called by Dinos because there were people on the property, whatever that argument is. And my response is that this was a unit. There were a couple dozen National Guard National Guard officers, so you're military, what you call them, John?
Soldiers.
National Guard soldiers, and then there was LMPD as well. For that group of people to leave their post and come to 26th and Broadway, an order from a superior officer was given. That just doesn't happen from a 911 call. Someone ordered that group of people to move on 26th and Broadway. When they approached 26th and Broadway, they were shooting folks with those non-lethal rounds of rubber bullets, and they have another, what they call pepper bullets? The pepper balls. They were shooting people. When I watched the video, it appeared that people ran into McAtee's establishment. McAtee doesn't know what's going on. He thinks his building is being fired upon. He reaches out to fire maybe a warning shot, like, hey, get away from my property, and he's killed. But why was that unit ordered to march down on 26th and Broadway where no protests were taking place with that type of force?
And also to add on to that, when did they change from pepper balls to live rounds? Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? When was that order given and why?
Right. So my issue has been, I've been hard on Mayor Fisher. And look, it hurt me originally because Mayor, I don't want to say we were friends, but I consider him an ally. I could call him. He'd come up here. We'd meet. He ran his campaign on two things. He ran his campaign on being a compassionate city and transparency. He even passed, well, I'm not saying he passed a law, but he had a policy at one point that when LMPD officers were involved in the shooting, that the body cam video would be released within 24 hours. He has done nothing of the sort in the BreonnaTaylor case. He's not been compassionate to the family, and he's not releasing any information whatsoever. So I've called him out on that. And this is not the Mayor Fisher that I thought that I knew. So it brings me to wonder why. Why are you being so hesitant as far as being transparent, and why are you not being the compassionate person that you've catered this city around being? So we have that. But I'm going to move over to Pastor Finley, man. This is my guy, man. And for those that don't know, this man, before I get into him, this man has changed my life without even knowing. In so many ways, without even knowing. But I don't think anybody could have gotten me into a church. Not me. Nobody could have got me into a church. And before we get into this, part of the reason I think is I've been hard on pastors. And I think over the past, I don't want to give a date to it, over the past maybe 5 or 10 years, we've seen a decline in black folks being involved in the church. And this is nationally. This is not just Louisville, it's nationally. And for me, I think one of the things with black folks is that there was misinformation. And I've held pastors accountable for that. And Finley is one of them that he fit what I was looking for. But when I don't want to get too far into this because it's not a religious conversation, but as black people, when we were raised in religion, and we were raised under when we were studying Jesus growing up. There were these images of Jesus, and the images were blonde hair, blue eyes, right? And people say it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what color Jesus is. It doesn't matter, right? And in any other context, I would say, man, it doesn't matter what color Jesus was, as long as he was for the people, right? But in America, the representation of Jesus was used as a symbol to say that if Jesus looks like this, then this group of people are superior over this other group of people. So growing up in the church and other pastors have ran with that narrative, this is what Jesus is, it turned a lot of this generation of black people off. And I think a lot of pastors have never confronted that relationship with the black community. So yeah, absolutely. So I applaud you for doing that. But to get into you, man, not only are you a pastor? If I saw Tim Finley on the street, I wouldn't even know he's a pastor. Of what I think was a traditional pastor, right? So I
think that's good.
So he had his Jordans on, he's fly, you know what I mean? But he's also active, right? And I think a lot of people forget that when we went through the civil rights movement, most of the civil rights movement was led from the black church. It was led from the black church. Martin Luther King was a member of the black church. A lot of people forget he was a pastor. So a lot of things were spearheaded from the black church. Finley is out in these streets. I go back to June 1st. I'm scrolling my Facebook. I can't remember where I'm. I think I was at work. And I'm scrolling my Facebook, and I see a video. I think it was Anetta Jones shared the video. And I see Pastor Finley on the ground in St. Matthews with, at the time, I thought it was a pistol, but apparently it was a taser. But there was a taser to his head. And just that image alone, it spoke volumes. So you were conducting a protest out in St. Matthews during the early days of the BreonnaTaylor protest. There's this St. Matthews police. I've seen him now on more than one occasion arresting black folks that come out to St. Matthews. So I guess his thing is that, look, black folks are not coming out here to St. Matthews protesting. That happened in Louisville. If you come out here, there's a no tolerance for that out there, right?
Like y'all not welcome in our neighborhood. Like y'all not welcome in our area.
Interesting about that, I had been down on 26th, right after David McAtee had been killed. So I was out there pretty much all day, and leaving there, just seeing some things, just, you know, it caused me to sort of think about, you know, what could be done in a different way. So I literally made my mind up to go out to Shelbyville Road while I was at David McAtee while he was still laying on the ground. Okay. He had been out there all day. And I just put on Facebook, I think I'm going to take a long walk on Shelbyville Road, and knowing what was going to happen. And got there, some folks showed up. We started walking down Shelbyville Road. We were maybe 15 minutes in. We got right out in front of Oxmoor Mall. And interesting enough, LMPD was there first. They drove past. Matter of fact, the guy did this and got on, you know what the Ford dealership is, and drove through there. We could see, because we had backed up traffic, we saw the police lights in the background, or behind the cars. They sped up, got on the side, sped in front of me. I made sure that I separated myself from the wall of protesters. Okay. Because I knew they were going to do this. And they jumped out. Some were in uniform, others were in fatigues. And I remember walking straight and the guy saying, get out of the street. And I maybe took two steps. I mean, I didn't run, took 2 steps. And on that second step, he grabbed me. But what was interesting was that when he grabbed me, he simultaneously said, stop resisting, because I had my hand up.
Right.
So again, he stopped resisting. At that point, if you watch the video, they're trying to like leg sweep me and do all this stuff. They're kicking my ankles. And I mean, I'm not small. Right. So I'm looking at the guy like, you know, I'm not resisting you. And he's kicking my legs. And I said this in this on the video, I said, I'm gonna go down. Like, you're not gonna knock me down. I'm gonna go down. So I got on my knee, and once I got on my knee, that's when they did the action. And I think that really speaks to what Attica's talking about, what you talked about. The issue is not so much, the argument is not about if the law was broken or not. To me, that's a separate thing. is that our police department, whether it's LMPD or the St. Matthews Police Department or national, they operate as judge, jury, and executioner.
Absolutely.
They feel like that they have unlimited power to do whatever they want to do, and they over-police black people. And I keep saying this, and people say, well, there's nothing to do with it right now. It does. The way a thing starts tells you a lot about what it presently is. The police department in this country started out as slave patrols.
Yes, sir.
They were put in place to manage, to intimidate, to brutalize slaves that stepped outside of whatever code of conduct was put in place. And we're seeing that over and over in our communities across the country, that police are operating as judge, jury, and executioner. And we have to talk about defunding the police. We have to talk about police reform. We have to talk about the Fraternal Order of Police, which in my mind is an obstructionist group. I'm not against unions, but the FOP, I've been going back and forth with them since Muchler. When Muchler did that, and I did an open letter to him, that the language that's embedded into the leadership, not just a person, but what's embedded into the leadership of the FOP, it says whether you're a good cop or a bad cop, we are going to defend you. And unfortunately, there are too many politicians that are receiving support, money, whatever the case may be, from this very powerful union, and they don't speak up when the wrong things. I mean, when's the last time you heard the FOP come out about the Explorer case?
Right.
Now, they were sexually abusing children. They didn't say nothing. Now they want to come out and defend these police officers that are obviously bad. And it's just, and then someone said to me, and this is why it pays to do your research, in Minnesota, the officers that killed George Floyd, well, they came out and talked about them. Well, people don't know that I think a portion of them weren't in that union. So if you're not a part of their union, they have no issue speaking against you. And I think that's an issue. And in our city, I used to, and I don't know if people know this, up until a month and a half ago, I worked in the Office of Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods. I was an employee of the city. I put up a post criticizing government. I was asked to take it down. I refused to take it down. And it's at that point that it dawned on me, yeah, I probably can't do this anymore. And that's why I appreciate people like Attica Scott, who are there, who are fighting for us, because too many times we have moderate people in these positions that are too busy trying to get into the good graces of everybody. It's just, it doesn't work like that. And we're at a reckoning point in our city, and Mayor Fisher has some explaining to do.
I also felt like, you know, that we are operating off of slave laws. These are slave laws that's been in place, what, 400 years? So how can they effectively govern a body of individuals that the laws weren't made for? And I think, you know, a lot of people, you know, so they get that confused that, you know, these laws was in place during slavery,
Right.
where they didn't even consider us as human beings.
Mm-hmm.
So how can they protect us if they wasn't meant for us?
Well,
It's
and it's
like James Baldwin said, too many people are stuck in history and have history stuck in them. And a lot of what's going on right now is that you have people that are so accustomed to the way things were,
Right.
They can't take monuments coming down. They can't take the Confederate flag. And if you ask yourself this as black people in this country, whatever started out, that's in place now, whatever started out with us in mind. So now, when we're saying, no, we're not good with that. We're not good with that. We're seeing white fragility now, and I believe the first half of this year, white fragility is now coming into white rage, where they're saying, no, our way of life is now under attack from people who we have been accustomed to taking certain things.
Yep.
These jokers now ain't taking it.
Right.
And we don't know what to do. And I think we have to be prepared, as Carol Anderson puts in that book, White Rage, we have to be prepared that there is going to be an answer. Donald Trump is an answer to Barack Obama.
exactly.
The answer, the response is coming, and we have to be so mobilized. That's why I support Attica and others. We have to have people in position to rebuff the white rage. that is coming, no question.
Look, and that's the thing, is that when we say that, and Sean, it's not just, you're right, it's the laws are outdated, but it's not just the laws, it's the mentality of America. So when we see a black person face charges that a white person faces, or we see a black person commit an act that a white person would commit, there's a different result from the same criminal justice system, because you have jurors, you have prosecutors, you have attorneys that look at black people in a certain light, that we're guilty, we're savages, we're evil from the beginning. So you go back to Nazi Germany and you look at what Hitler did to the Jewish people. When World War II was over, Germany eradicated the country of every trace of brutality that Hitler waged on that community. When slavery was erased when slavery was a so-called abolished in America, there was never that treatment for black folks.
Prison system.
Exactly. Black folks still had to fight. It led from slavery to black codes. It led from that to segregation in the South to Jim Crow. It led to redlining. It led to black folks fighting and dying for every ounce of freedom that we attempt to achieve. So there's never been a national... America's never even apologized to black folks. You know what I'm saying? For slavery. They've never even apologized to black folks. So I use Nick Cannon as an example. You see Nick Cannon a few days ago, he made some disparaging remarks against the Jewish community. The Jewish community in America, if you make a remark that's deemed to be anti-Semitic, it's as if you've committed treason. You know, there's a zero tolerance for that. Well, there should also be a zero tolerance for disparaging treatment against black folks, but it's accepted in America that you can treat black folks any type of way. And
well, we've been historically the economic engine of this country. We
right.
were never viewed as human. We were viewed as commodities where the wealth of this country was built. So when you talk about black folks, there is still an embedded racial structure mentality that is in this country. It's still there, and I think we have to understand it. I mean, I think you make a perfect example. I was talking to a group of folks about the monument thing, the Confederate flags, and they were just like, I don't understand, it's our history. And I said, look at it like this. Let's say you're in a relationship. Let's say that you end up cheating, abusing, but you cheat on your significant other. Now, you apologize. They haven't done that, but you apologize, and now years later, your significant other goes through your underwear drawer and finds lingerie. When she comes and says, or he comes and says, hey, what is this? If you say, no, this was a turning point in our relationship,
right.
History, what do you think the significant other is going to say? Get these pieces out of here immediately. In our country, there are people, and it's amazing to me, that want to use the history argument when most of the monuments in this country were not built right after the Civil War. They were built between the 1930s and the 1960s. Why so late? Because at that time, it's the birth of a change, a apparent change in our country, and those were erected, those effigies were put in place to say to black people, know your role. So those are not historic monuments. Those are behavior control monuments. And I believe every single one should come down. Every one.
And not to mention that these monuments, they symbolize the loser. You lost. Who makes monuments of the loser, right? And then to go even deeper, they were traitors. You had what was it, 11 states in the South that actually departed from the United States at the time.
Right.
They left the Union. So they traded from the Union. They were traitors, and then they lost, and now they're being celebrated in a losing effort.
But they were holding up whiteness, so we're going to
Right.
celebrate whiteness.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's what that's about. I mean, and we see it even in, you talk about the National Guard, right, being at 26 Broadway. One of the things we've been conditioned to believe as white people in Kentucky is that we cannot criticize the governor. White people have taught us that from day one, and so we don't criticize at all. But the reality is we need to have a conversation about why the governor sent the National Guard state troopers to Louisville in the first place. You had these two white men, the mayor and the governor, colluding against us to say, okay, man, I'm going to go ahead and do that for you. Instead of the governor saying, no, you need to talk to your people. I don't need to weaponize the state troopers and the National Guard against your people because you refuse to talk to them and listen to them. That's what should have happened in the first place. But we haven't really lifted up that conversation because we believe we can't. We've been told by white people, don't say anything bad about Uncle Andy. And don't criticize anything that he does because he's doing everything in the best interest of the people of Kentucky, but not black people. And so black people need to understand and need to learn to speak up and say, not all these white folks who are in office are for us and with us. You talked about allies. Sometimes allies can be the worst people in the world, right? People who mean us well are doing the most harm sometimes. And so we have to acknowledge that.
I call them handshake. They smile in public but make handshake deals in private. And I think that's a lot of stuff that's been going on here. They'll say all the right things in the public eye, but behind closed doors, they're not doing nothing that benefits the African American community.
And let me say this to Attica's point, and I think it happened. She brings up something that we don't talk about, and it needs to be said. David McAtee would be alive right now if the National Guard was not in the West End.
Right.
That has to be put out there. He would be alive right now if they weren't there.
We can take it a step farther. What's his name? Tyler
Gerger.
He would have been alive if the mayor would have stepped up and made a decision about these officers.
Right. Now I read a piece from a professor, I think the University of Minnesota and from the University of Louisville, and they were responding to Mayor Fisher's comment that he can't release any information because there's an ongoing FBI and Attorney General investigation. And these professors, both professors, said, well, if he can't, and if the Attorney General can't, then they're failing to do their duty. Because he said a skilled lawmaker is able to keep the public abreast of updates in the case without compromising the integrity of the case. If you can't do both, then you can't do your job.
Well, I think that the reason why there's been such a slow trickle of information up to this point, it has not been because they're trying to figure out what they can do lawfully or unlawfully. I think that there are so many corrupted variables in this case that things are being done. I mean, we don't talk about the fact that right after Breonna was murdered, one of the officers disappears
for 2.5 hours
plus minutes, as if that's normal.
Yeah.
The fact that the officers asked her mother, did she have any enemies, knowing
they
killed
her. Yeah.
The fact that, and I'm no Daniel Cameron fan whatsoever, he gets on TV and he completely says the opposite of what our mayor has said. I'm waiting on information. Mayor gets on and says, well, the reason why he said it's so much political verbiage that it's almost like word vomit. They're just saying things, and it's all corrupt. It's all, it all stinks. And I think, again, working with the mayor, and I think that up until this point, I was one that would say, oh, the mayor, he's a good dude. I'm not in that camp anymore. And when I say that, not that I believe he's got this wicked heart, but I'm saying this is not the time for that conversation. 3 weeks ago, if you would have asked me, does Mayor Fisher need to resign? I would have said, well, wait a minute. Well, who's coming behind him? That may be, and I get it. But right now, this has been so poorly handled. It has exacerbated the situation in our city so much that there has to be consequences. And I believe right now, Mayor Fisher needs to do something immediately, or he needs to step aside, because the eyes of the world are on our city, and we haven't even gotten to Derby yet.
Right.
Well, we also have to keep in mind that Mayor Fisher is not conducting the investigation. So why can't he share information?
Right.
He's not the prosecutor in this case.
Right.
So his comments mean nothing to me.
And one of my complaints with Mayor Fisher is this. Mayor Fisher, don't try to mislead the people. The Commonwealth of Kentucky had this case for 2.5 months prior to the FBI and Attorney General getting this case. You didn't give up information before it went to the FBI and the Attorney General.
Well, also remember this week something came out, and it's been so much going on that maybe we're not it's so much information, it's hard to keep up. But this week, I think it was Wave 3 troubleshooters, the place-based investigation, they found out that they were, in fact, working with the Office of Community Development, something like that, within the mayor's office. Now, people don't know, well, why is that such a big deal? Big deal. If you have a division of LMPD taking orders or taking direction from not other law enforcement leadership, but from elected officials, administrative offices,
Right.
you have an issue, because now all of a sudden you can do, it's almost like you have your own sort of mafioso gang.
Yep.
And that's a problem. And you can't tell me that Mayor Fisher didn't know about that.
Right.
So maybe a lot of this slow
Tap
trickle
dancing.
of information,
A lot of this tap
well,
dancing.
a lot of it is because they're sort of correcting things as they go. But there's a problem with, again, I don't think it's so much about gentrification in this case. The problem is you had special policing going on in an area of town with a property that you wanted, and you policed them people very hard to get what
that
you
property.
wanted. And the problem is that opens up a whole nother door, because you wonder, well, where else have y'all done that?
Yep.
Right.
Where else have you thrown people in jail because you wanted that property?
Right.
And I don't and don't tell me, well, it was for the betterment of West Louisville. Well, here's the thing. I don't want to see my brothers and sisters in jail, in prison,
Or dead.
or dead,
Right.
because, oh, we trying to put 3 houses over here. That's a problem.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Look, that's the thing that I raise this point often as well. Mayor Fisher, the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and LMPD was completely fine with putting Kenneth Walker in prison for decades
Right.
for attempted murder on a police officer until this case went national.
Right.
You charged him. Had there not been national outcry, that brother would be charged right now and probably on his way to prison. And you guys were able to sleep at night with that taking
Right, I'll
place.
tell you this, and again, you know, I'll put it all out there. I was a part of a particular group that gets to discuss certain things when it happens in our city in terms of shooting. I went to South Africa mid-March. This happened around that time. The way that it was presented to me and others was there was a raid, a drug dealer shot at the officers, and his girlfriend was caught in the crossfire. Case closed.
That's how it's presented to the
So
community.
we were thinking, oh, okay. Then to come and find out, oh no, it was none of that. You even deceived the people that you said you wanted at the table to bring about fairness. So one of the things that we're seeing now is that the mayor and others have tried to put together these groups where they handpick people, handpick information, and it's only because we want the community to believe, hey, we got black people at the table too.
Yeah.
Now, we ain't telling them nothing. We're deceiving them, but we need y'all to go to your churches, your groups, your representatives, and tell them everything is okay. And there is such an erosion of trust right now that, to be honest, I trust nothing that comes from this administration. I trust nothing that comes from this police department. I've had people doing death threats on almost every social media platform. Somebody said, well, why don't you send it to the police? For what? It might be them.
Right.
I might just get my church security. Don't handle this.
Right.
Well, we have found in some cases that it is the police that's
Absolutely.
harassing people on social media.
Yeah.
So you're justified in that.
Oh, you have found that?
There have been multiple people
Yeah.
who have talked about the
Yes.
police harassing them on their social
Yes.
media.
Wow.
No question.
Yes.
No JCPS teachers, police, everybody. They just all help us. Lord.
Yeah, and see, that was look, that was one of the issues that I presented to Mayor Fisher. We were on a Zoom call maybe back in May. Was it May, Sean?
Yeah,
we were on a Zoom call, and look, Mayor Fisher is usually cool. I've never seen Mayor Fisher lose his cool. He got pissed at me on the Zoom call, but I asked him. I said, I'm gonna put it back up again too. I asked him. I said,
told them they was light. I told them they was light on the
but listen, I asked him. I said, I didn't even call him Mayor because I wasn't respecting him. I said, Mr. Fisher. I said, it feels like the police, LMPD, has been running rogue under your leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And for at the time, I think the FBI had the case for maybe 5 days. So I said, Mr. Fisher, you've had this case for over 2 months. Why, after the Ahmaud Arbery case and the George Floyd case, and this case, it shined light on BreonnaTaylor and it went national, why is it just now being handed over to the FBI? If you thought that it needed federal coverage or federal investigation, why wouldn't you have done this from the beginning? And I said, my fear is that had this case not have garnered national attention, it would have been swept under the rug. I've never seen him lose his cool in a video. He was pissed. He hasn't answered my call since then, but he was pissed.
Right. It's like what John Yarmouth said, and I like John Yarmouth. Like, he's a nice guy. At BreonnaTaylor's balloon release, we were, all downtown. He gets up, and I just couldn't believe what I was hearing, and people cheered it. But I was like, y'all hear what this man just said? He says, well, you all pushed us. And sometimes politicians won't do anything until the people push them.
What?
Woo! And I said, y'all hear what he just said? He's saying they won't do the right thing until we hold them accountable to do the right thing. And that's exactly the culture that we live in.
That's the culture we live in. He is not wrong. I mean, I don't like to hear it, but it's true.
Right.
I served with these folks. I served on Metro Council for 3.5 years. I've been in Frankfurt for 3.5 years. I've seen it. Robert Stivers, president of the Senate, all of a sudden cares about black lives and wants to have a bill to ban no-knock warrants across Kentucky. Now, he's not going to say Breonna's name, but he wants a bill to ban no-knock warrants across Kentucky. Same person who voted for Blue Lives Matter my first session in Frankfurt. The same person who voted for the so-called gang bill my second session in Frankfurt. A bill that the mayor supported, the gang bill. I just believe everybody should know that. So all of a sudden, these black folks are supposed to trust white people who have voted against us and our best interests every single time. It's not that the congressman is wrong. I mean, we don't like him saying it, but he's right.
He's right.
I mean,
people,
what I said, I said it on my Facebook. People are the #1 gross domestic product in the world. So once we stop moving, the money stop moving, and once the money stop moving, that's when they're gonna start making changes. So we have to figure out a way, non-violently, to stop the money, stop the flow of the money, and that's when we're gonna make change within this, the things that we need, the agenda that we have set forth for our community.
Well, speaking of stopping the money, that goes perfect segue, Sean, into Pastor Finley, because Pastor Finley's been on a crusade to boycott the Kentucky Derby. So for those who don't know, if you're outside of the city of Louisville, the Kentucky Derby usually takes place the first weekend of May every year. I don't think have we ever missed a Kentucky Derby in history?
Once.
Yeah, I think once. I think it was once.
Okay, so once we've missed the Kentucky Derby. This year, I thought we would miss the Kentucky Derby, but it's been rescheduled for, I believe, Labor Day weekend. Is that Labor Day?
Yeah.
Labor Day weekend, so the first weekend in September. So you have been on a boycott. You have been on a crusade to boycott the Kentucky Derby.
Well, not just boycott, but to disrupt the Kentucky Derby. And let me say this. I lead the Justice and Freedom Coalition, but there are other groups that have released letters who have said different things, and I support all of them. We're just the latest to get on that, but I'm really, really passionate about it because the Kentucky Derby is celebratory, it's festive, it's an economic explosion in our city, and I think when you look at this moment that we're in, there is no way that we should be celebrating, being festive, when we're still waiting for justice for BreonnaTaylor, for David McAtee, and others. So a part of what we're doing, and we're coming together, we're strategizing, I'm going to be getting with other groups as well, but it's not just boycotting Churchill Downs. It is mass demonstrations in multiple places, all over the city, all week, and making sure that people understand this is not a time for you to retreat into your groups and act as if there aren't people in this city, a family that is still hurting, a community that is still hurting. So we're going to make that something that the world will absolutely see, and we want to make it uncomfortable for people to just march into these black tie fair dinners and have a good time. And then I've had people, of course, the things that I've done in the past, you get people saying things, but for whatever reason, the moment I came out talking about Derby, I mean, they got really, really mad. But the issue for me, and people have gotten upset because they said, well, the Derby, it brings money into our city, so you're going to be hurting your own community. I said, the Derby's been going on for 100+ years. Now let me ask you a question. Go west of 9th and tell me where the Derby has helped there.
They shut us down.
They shut us down. They absolutely shut us down, and the West End, Newburgh, and other distressed communities. So the truth is, this is about BreonnaTaylor. This is about the budget that was just passed, where we did all this talk, and then you passed this flat budget, and then you turn around and almost defund Evolve 502, which the whole organization is about helping minority children. So for me, this year needs to be about demonstration, disruption, and demanding change. And it's not just Derby, it's going forward. Because I don't believe things can change in our community. I don't think things will change in our city until we do what you said. I'm going to protest, I'm going to make demands, but now it's time for us to have a sustainable plan, move forward, don't let up, keep going. And I don't know about anybody else, but I have a plethora of creative ways to agitate, disrupt, and demand, and I will keep doing it because I feel like this is a part of my calling.
He said,
that's
one of my favorite. That's my daughter's favorite word.
I came up with something, Pastor Finley. It's going to be a National Black Calling Day, where every black laborer, whatever profession you in, if you're a person of color, you call in. That stops the money. It might not just stop it for that day. Just to show the power of unity. It's so much going, and there's so many ideas, and I'm open to just sitting down and collaborating, because here's the thing, we've almost forgotten about this. We're talking about BreonnaTaylor, talking about Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd. Even here, I'm still wondering what happened to Gianna McMillan, issues with Michael Newby. We're talking about all those things. Gasaway. But here's the other issue. We're in the middle of a pandemic,
right, that
disproportionately affects black people. So while we're talking about BreonnaTaylor, we're still dying at a high rate from a pandemic that's running roughshod through our community because we don't have adequate health care.
Not only adequate health care, because that's the thing that gets me about both the governor and the mayor. The governor thinks the solution is we all get health care. It's not only that, it's implicit bias in health care. Yes. Why in the world do I even want to go see a doctor who's going to judge me based on my zip code and my educational level? It's not only that, it's also where I live. My neighborhood in Parkland, 30% of the buildings are abandoned, boarded up. Wow. That is unhealthy and unsafe. Until we address those issues, we're going to continue to be disproportionately impacted. I have the privilege of serving a district that 50% of it is in the East End, St. Matthews, as part of my district, all the way to the West End, almost Chickasaw Park.
I got lost in that thing.
So every day I get to drive this district and see how disproportionately we are impacted in the West End, and how the East End has everything. My constituents in the East End never have to leave the East End for anything. Every single day we have to leave the West End for what we need.
And then that's another problem, because you know what I'm saying, a lot of the resources and money leave our community, and it's not there to help build up our community, and that's what we losing there too.
Right. And let me go further. When you were talking about healthcare, you're absolutely correct. But there's another component to that as well. When it comes to healthcare, I know personally with family members, when you have a person, whether it be of color or a poor person, that goes to a healthcare physician and they're on Medicare, there's often this practice that takes place as, oh, well, you need a surgery, or oh, you need this, you need that, because Medicare covers a lot of these expenses. So often these physicians they conduct procedures that run the bill up that these people necessarily don't need. I had a family member go get a surgery that's supposed to be a one-time surgery, and they need 5 more to correct the surgery that from the initial surgery. So it's not just healthcare. You're right. There's a bias in the healthcare system when it comes to providers as well.
Well, my daughter's a pharmacy tech, and she says often, I've got folks coming in here who don't need all this medicine that they're being prescribed. She's like, if they take some natural steps to address some of their ailments, they'll be fine. But our folks are getting prescribed and overprescribed.
Drugs.
Right, drugs. Right.
And that starts from school. That also from the school system.
Well, it starts from Big Pharma.
Right. Where the school system, where they deem a kid to be hyper, whatever the case may be, the first step that they say, well, let's give them some medication.
And the parent a check for putting them on medication.
So that that's another way of stripping of us of our natural resources. Prison to school to prison pipeline. That's another resource that's stripping us of our natural resources, our reproduction our kids.
Well, see, a lot of doctors also receive kickbacks from pharmaceutical. I deliver pharmaceuticals for a living, so a lot of doctors. No, legal pharmaceuticals to nursing homes and hospitals.
That's Sunday, my office, sir.
but often physicians, they receive kickbacks from pharmaceutical companies if they offer a certain drug to a client. So they get, instead of kickbacks, I guess it's called incentive, or it's called
bonuses. We're going to say bonuses.
Right. So
Sounds like what we do in government.
yeah.
Incentives, kickbacks, bonuses.
All of them connected, though. You know, all the systems are connected. So
Right.
once we get these systems unraveled, then that's when we'll progress as people.
I'm just grateful. My black primary care is black, and he will not prescribe unless he has to.
But here's another thing too. Have you noticed when our government has done massive raids on physicians? Right, it's been black physicians or physicians of color. They've physicians that have prescribed what they call doctor shopping and things like that. It's been, those are the poster when you see the doctors that get arrested, and I look on them and I say, please don't let it be a black guy. Look up, it's a black guy. You know what I'm saying? So they're making examples out of doctors that are of color. When it comes to the media, they're making examples out of these doctors as opposed to white doctors. But to get back to your question, we have a few minutes. You said earlier that you worked for Metro Louisville and it was frowned upon, a criticism, I guess, that you made about the city.
Mm-hmm.
Is that part of the problem, that we have a city that operates, but then does that deter, say, if something happens like a whistleblower or someone on the inside that sees something happening and then the city says, well, wait a minute, you're an employee, you can't speak out against this. That kind of keeps the problem rotating.
Yeah, well, and I don't think that is abnormal. I think in any, governmental structure, in any corporate structure, generally you don't speak about, what you're involved in, what, who you work for. But in this situation, for me, because of the implications, because of the national narrative, and then because of the recurring issues within LMPD, which I think has, as presently constructed, has been one of the most corrupt police departments in the country.
Yes,
We're starting to find that out more and more.
And this has to be highlighted. This is a police department that Mayor Fisher built.
Yeah.
When Chief Robert White left, and this is something I was talking with Sadiq the other day. He what's his name? Conrad inherited a pretty decent police department. It wasn't like rife with issues and all those kind of things. This is what he built, and he's allowed it to devolve into what it is right now. So I think in this situation, it was really, really important for me, in the position that I was in and am in now, to speak the truth about what I was seeing. And it wasn't emotional. It wasn't just something put out there just to say it, to get on a bandwagon. I saw Mr. Conrad, I saw the police department over and over display corrupt tendencies. And at some point, it's not just tendencies, it's who they are. Yeah. And there has to be accountability. And we have to be able to speak to those things. And I believe that it's people like Attica. I'm so glad to see who just got on city council.
Ja'Cory Arthur.
Ja'Cory. People like that, we've got to see more and more. But here's the other point, and I'll say this and I'll be quiet. It can't just be black people.
Right.
If every black person supports a candidate, let's say, not every, but let's say a large majority, like a Charles Booker, if you don't have white people and others to also support, that's going to be an issue. Come November, I'm sure I'm going to make more news, because I think it's too important for anyone to hide behind their vote of Donald Trump. And in the role that I'm in, I'm a pastor, I'm clergy. My white brothers and sisters in the clergy, you need to know, I need to know, we need to know, the black people in your congregation need to know who you stand with. Southeast, Northeast, Sojourner, everybody. This is not the time to be quiet. This is one of the most pivotal elections in our lifetime, at least. And if this man gets another 4 years, I think he's going to do irreparable harm.
Yep.
So right now, we need to know what you stand for, who you're standing with, and that needs to be voiced. And if it's not out there, then we're going to be louder and louder and louder because it's that important.
And Brad, that's one of the reasons why I keep coming for Amy McGrath. She does not get to run for Senate and not have a racial justice platform.
Right.
We cannot keep telling ourselves, well, that's all we got. That's our only choice.
Because we don't.
Because we're right. We do it every single time and we still don't benefit.
Right.
So she does not get to run November 3rd without having a racial justice platform. And all of us as black folks need to make that very clear to her. We also need to make it clear to Joe Biden. He doesn't get to run for president without a racial justice platform, without censoring us. Those days are over.
Right. And I want to end on this. This is my stance on Mayor Fisher. And if he comes up here again next week, like he's said he may, this is my position. I am calling for Mayor Greg Fisher to resign. And the reason being is that I compare Mayor Greg Fisher to Rick Pitino a few years ago. Mayor Fisher, a lot of people don't know that the mayor handpicks his chief of police. It's an appointed position. He handpicks the chief of police. What you hear coming from the chief of police, you can assume are the sentiments of the mayor or have been approved by the mayor. Mayor Fisher has overseen a corrupt police department. We can look at the handling of the Explorer case. We can look at African Americans being racially profiled in West Louisville, down to a pastor being racially profiled in West Louisville. We can look at the deaths of unarmed black people under Mayor Fisher. We can look at the BreonnaTaylor case. Mayor Fisher's assertion is that he doesn't know what's going on in this police department. If I want to give him the benefit of the doubt, not knowing is just as bad as knowing. If you oversee a department and you don't know what's going on inside your own department,
It's called dereliction of duty.
there it is. You have totally mismanaged your duties. And you cannot oversee a city, let alone be the president of a council of mayors or whatever he went to go do in D.C. Your leadership skills, for lack of a better word, you're not being a leader if your department is able to function in this way. And if you say you don't know, that's a problem. If you do know, that's a bigger problem. But either way, you've shown lack of leadership. So we'll end it on that. I want to thank you, Pastor Finley, for coming in. I want to thank you, Representative Attica Scott. You're always welcome on this platform. People, please tune in to Urban Voices Radio every Saturday afternoon at 1 p.m. You can listen live on 106.3 FM. If not, you can listen online at kyheartmedia.com, or you can follow us on Urban Voices on YouTube and Facebook. We